The history of SpongeBob SquarePants, a brief history. Let's get
Today's
into
episode of A Brief History is sponsored by Squarespace. Stay tuned to the end of to find out more information.
I swear I don't know half of what's
If you're anything like me, then you probably have a chronic disease of the pancreas. But more importantly, you were born in the mid-1990s. You know, late enough that you don't really remember the 90s, but early enough that you can still read BuzzFeed and feel like you get it. And if there's one thing we 2000s kids disguised as 90s kids remember, it's Nicktoons. You know, the days of Doug, Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Wild Thornberrys, Rocket Power, and a bunch of other crazy cartoons that I didn't really like all that much. But when it comes to Nickelodeon, there was always one cartoon that reigned supreme.
The GOAT.
And it wasn't as told by Ginger. No, Nickelodeon's ace in the hole was, of course, SpongeBob Squarepants. And for us 90s kid imposters, SpongeBob was inescapable. If we weren't playing Pokemon Silver on our lime green Game Boy Colors, or listening to 30 seconds of It's Gonna Be Me on our hit clips, that's right, I can list old things too. If we weren't doing all that, then we were probably watching SpongeBob on our SpongeBob TV while all snuggled up in our SpongeBob beds eating
Why don't they make cool TVs like they used to? Cool products like they used to, bro.
SpongeBob Cream of Wheat, which, yes, is absolutely a real thing. There was no bigger kids cartoon in existence at the time. And even today, when cartoons are looking a lot less like Cow and Chicken and a lot more like Stevie University, SpongeBob is still out there just doing its thing. And I want to talk about it. So, hello and welcome to another episode of A Brief History. Today's episode, SpongeBob SquarePants. Ready, set, SpongeBob was created by this dude named Steven Hillenburg, a guy who spent a good chunk of the 80s teaching marine biology to kids in Orange County, California. But while teaching his wet science class, he decided that he wanted to flex his art muscles too, creating a little comic called the Intertidal Zone that featured a bunch of talking sea creatures that aim to help teach the little tadpoles more about underwater life, including this little weirdo, Bob the Sponge. I don't think he's gonna be that important. But eventually, Hillenburg decided he was ready to move on from marine biology and further pursue his interest in art. So he packed up his stuff and enrolled at Cal Arts to study animation. A few years and one fine arts and experimental animation degree later, and Hillenburg gets picked up by Nickelodeon to work on a show called Rocko's Modern Life. But after that show ended in 1996, he kinda needed something new to work on. And at the recommendation of one of his Rocko co-workers, Hillenburg decided to pursue making his own cartoon based off the Intertidal Zone. Change up a few things, figure out your main characters, do a few rounds of pitching in a Hawaiian shirt, and in 1997, SpongeBOy Ahoy was greenlit for full production.
I never knew about that.
Despite that not actually being the name they went with, though that was the show's original title. And then, come May 1st, 1999, Steven Hillenburg's show, now known as SpongeBob Squarepants, was officially premiered on Nickelodeon. We all know what this show's about, right? SpongeBob lives in a pineapple under the sea, absorbent and yellow and porous is he. He gets into nautical nonsense with his various undersea friends, and he drops on the deck and flops like a fish, which means he is gasping for breath. He is clinging onto his life by a thread. He can't breathe. His spongy fish lungs cry out for water. The darkness creeps in slowly. He's scared. He had so much he still wants.
Bro, how come right as he did that I get immense chest pain? Why?
To do in life, only for his life to be cut so short in a tragic end.
Stop doing that.
But yeah, we all know what SpongeBob is about. It's your standard comedy story about a sponge that makes burgers for a greedy crab and does karate with a scientist squirrel who lives in an air dome. It's nothing you haven't seen before, your run-of-the-mill sponge-based comedy. But despite its clear and totally not sarcastic unoriginality, SpongeBob was an immediate hit for Nickelodeon. Audiences both young and old really latched onto this show's clever writing, unique world, and likable cast of characters, quickly making SpongeBob Nick's newest #1 show. But it went so much further than that. Throughout the early 2000s, SpongeBob was a total phenomenon, with countless toys, books, video games, nightmares, and more.
Oh,
and
what
of
the
course, the
fuck is-
show was still going strong, premiering a second and third season that were chock full of classic
Shit is still
episodes that
going
people
crazy.
still quote and make Twitter memes of today. In
The
fact,
best.
SpongeBob had become such a massive hit that by November of 2004, the series saw a full-fledged feature film that was, again, pretty much a classic.
Exactly, a classic, bro. Talk about a movie. Money well spent.
For my generation. Except for this scene. This scene messed me up.
Yeah.
Dear
RIP.
Lord, I was only kidding about the whole suffocation thing. But as great as that movie was, this is
Amazing.
where trouble started to brew. You see, by the time the SpongeBob Squarepants movie was released, the show had been on the air for about 5 years, and Steven Hillenburg was kinda ready to wrap things up. He and
Damn.
many of the show's writers felt like the series had run its course, and going any longer could risk the show jumping the shark. Wait, are there any shark?
I feel like if there was enough, like a big, really big group of writers, I guess it wouldn't even have to be that big. Just like big brain, you know, out the box like thinkers. They could really keep this show going for a while with good storylines. Just look at how your best ones did and like do that same plot line, you know?
Characters in SpongeBob that I can make like a joke out
There's
of
so
here.
many stories possible.
There's the anchor arms guy. I think the tough guy from the Salty Spittoon. Was he a shark?
Early
I think he was a
seasons were
shark.
perfect creativity.
Never mind. Never mind. Abandoned joke.
and
Abandoned
it
joke.
didn't go too
So
far.
pretty much none of the main people behind SpongeBob wanted to keep the show going. But Nickelodeon sat in its pile of money, was like,
Oh,
come
yeah.
on. And thus, in 2005, we got SpongeBob Season 4, the first ever season of SpongeBob that Steven Hillenburg did not spearhead. He had
Damn.
stepped away from his showrunner position and acted as an executive producer instead, but didn't really have much of a hands-on involvement with the show. The new showrunner was longtime SpongeBob writer Paul Tibbett, and while this change happened pretty smoothly at the time, Season 4 began what many view as a steady decline in quality for SpongeBob. Taking a pretty big leap here from 2005 to 2015, and the show had seen 6 more seasons and had
Damn.
even changed showrunners for a second time. Most of the writers who made the classic seasons were long gone, and the show's comedy and tone had been shifting in a way that
Yeah.
really turned older fans off. The new
Very,
seasons
yeah,
featured less
different.
of the clever writing and setups that fans loved, and instead started to get predictable and weirdly gross. The show was still doing well in ratings, but the sponge was starting to dry out. No, don't show that clip again. It's too sad. It's like one Dodie song away from making me shed tears. Not my skin or my hair, just my, gross. However, after 10 years of decline, things actually started to turn around for SpongeBob. 2015 saw the premiere of SpongeBob's second movie, Sponge Out of Water. And for this movie, Steven
W.
Hillenburg returned in a major writing role for the first time in basically a decade. And following the warm reception of the film, Hillenburg did what many fans thought would never happen and returned to SpongeBob. And not only that, but a lot of writers from the show's golden age were also returning to the show. And as a result, seasons 10 and 11 have actually managed to get a lot of older SpongeBob fans back on board,
What we'd love
bringing
to
back
see.
older characters and settings that had pretty much been forgotten about in later seasons. Remember
was
Bubble Bass?
stupid.
He's back. Nosferatu? He's back.
Goated.
That guy that shouts, "My leg! My leg! My leg! My leg!" Oh, you better believe he's back. And outside of the show, SpongeBob's still doing really well as a general media franchise,
It'll never
boasting
die.
a Broadway musical that is way better than it has any right to be, and recently ended its run, which means I didn't get to see it. And there's a third movie coming in 2020, whatever. So, SpongeBob has been through quite a few ups and downs over the years. Back when it premiered, it was quite literally the most popular kids show on television. However, despite never really having a drastic drop in ratings, the later seasons kinda tanked the show's reputation a bit. But at the end of the day, I almost don't think that matters. Like, yeah, post-movie SpongeBob was not as good as it used to be, but it was far, far, far from the worst cartoon out there. And obviously, it's fantastic that the show is picking up steam again and getting more creative. But even if that hadn't happened and the show freaking crashed, burned, and did an episode about why the ending to Life is Strange Before the Storm was actually really good, I don't think any of that could truly take away from this show's legacy of just being really freaking good, guys. I mean, there's a reason that the characters and jokes from this show are still quoted and referenced to this day. And that's because it's just timeless quality comedy. The kind that, going on 20 years later, we still remember by heart, and chances are we'll still be quoting in another 20 years. So, in conclusion, I think SpongeBob is good. Though I might be a tad bit biased. But you know what's even better than SpongeBob Squarepants? SpongeBob Square Space. I'm sorry.
What?
Oh boy, it's sponsored!
That was actually a W. If we're being honest, SpongeBob will never die. It will never just go away. It's just not a thing. That video was fire though. The history of SpongeBob. And of course, the video is a little bit, you know, a little bit old, 6 years, damn. So it's not fully up to date. Steven Hillenburg did unfortunately pass away. I'm not too familiar on how the show has been. I gotta log back in. This shit looks good right here. I'm not gonna lie. That's a good video.
I'ma take it slow. Wanna keep it short, so I'ma let it blow. Riding around with drugs, I'm an evil soul. My heart's always broke, please just leave me alone. My heart's always broke, please just leave me alone.